So after my experience of getting into the endgame of Diablo 4, I have a few tips of things you can do in the endgame to progress your character and get stronger, and how to do the various activities the endgame presents you. Now everything you do from this point should be in the Nightmare difficulty tier 3, right over here. This is mainly because in the endgame, the first thing you're going to want to do is work yourself to getting gear and items that are sacred or even unique items. Now, if you're unsure on what the difference is once you get to tier 3, you get certain items that drop that are better than just legendary. This right over here is a legendary amulet. This right over here is a unique ring. The unique items are things that you cannot change any of those different stats, and every time you collect this item, you will have those exact values again. I actually have this for my staff, my sacred unique staff. I have received 2 of these, both from Nightmare dungeons, and every single stat on them is the exact same. The only thing you're able to change is adding the 2 extra sockets so that you can fit gems in. But you can see the prefix over here at the top there says Sacred Unique Boots. You get the same thing for Sacred in all the different qualities. You can get a Sacred Blue item, a Sacred Rare item. But what you're most likely going to gun for after level 50 is the Sacred Legendary items, because they are a lot stronger than the regular Legendary items. You'll also notice this on the aspects that you can collect on the game. These also come in different forms where they can be so much stronger than what they normally would be. If you look at this aspect over here, this barrier gives me a 3,147. But if I had to use the one from my codex, you'll see it only does 1,616. So I actually found a really good one on a sacred piece of legendary gear and was able to move it over onto this chest plate by imprinting it, as you can see over there, which I'll show you in a second on how to do this. Now, gear is something that you're going to be working on throughout all these different systems in the game. Another thing you're going to be working on is your Paragon board, because of course after level 50 you do not get any more skills. You instead get Paragon points at every 25% of a level. So every level will give you a total of 4 Paragon points, 1, 2, 3, and then 4 for completing a level. I also recommend when you're done with the game, if you go to the different regions of the map, you'll be able to check these different progresses of the areas in terms of your renown, and you can see here the final option gives you +4 Paragon points, which is essentially a free level. And you can do this for all 5 regions in the game. Now, the limit to get to the max one over here is just over 2,000 renown. This requires you to get waypoints, complete strongholds, do side quests, discover areas of the map, do side dungeons, and find the altars of Lilith. This does take a lot of time, but this was one of the first things I focused on completing for those Paragon points. Now, Paragon points at first might seem not super important, but these are crazy, and a very big mistake people can make is by taking every single option on the first, board. Because firstly, you'll probably just see just this. For your class, I think it's very specific to what your class can do. And your goal is not to select every single option here. Your goal is rather to target specific slots, especially these glyph sockets, which you can fit in glyphs that you find through Nightmare dungeons and various activities within the game. You can see this one adds an extra 19% damage to enemies that are close by. And since all of my damage is done from close range, it's fantastic. But after you've gotten this, you're going to want to work your way up to the final board attachment gate. And once you unlock this, you'll be able to unlock a variety of different board options to select your, and you can even rotate it. So you can see here, there's a board attachment gate over here. So if you want to add a different board and connect and go this way, you can do that. You can even have this board gate start over here so that you start from this point instead of from this point. But what you're going to want to look out for is these different nodes, these yellow nodes that adds very specific things. Like this one over here has 10% damage to burning enemies. Since I burn enemies and gain damage from burning enemies, increasing my critical hit as a sorcerer, this is something I wanted to go for first. And then this, of course, leads to this way over here to another one. And you kind of map your path out until you get to where you need to be. Like, for example, this legendary node over here, Burning Instinct, is one that I'll probably gun for towards the end of, my late 60s in my level. Now, you will notice that some of the nodes, especially like the rare ones, will have a requirement that adds the bonus. Now, this isn't a requirement to get like the actual top one. I will get the 4% damage reduction and I will get that 10 intelligence, but I won't get that bonus one until I have that 250 dexterity. And this is something you can fill out with the board or actually just your items that contribute to this that you're wearing. Any of these items that add dexterity will help me complete that nodes so that I can get that additional bonus to this ability. Glyphs have the exact same thing, but they work in a slightly different way. For example, this glyph over here requires me to get a plus 25 dexterity, but it has to be within this red range around the glyph. So you can see here all the dexterity ones I have here. I have that one there, I have this one here, this one over here, that one over there, and this one down over here. And this is all the dexterity nodes that are around this one here, giving me that extra bonus so that I can deal 10% increased damage to slowed enemies and 20% damage to stunned or frozen enemies, which my build is based on. And this, of course, is a glyph that I slotted in over here. You will notice that these glyphs have different levels, and you are able to level them up through the Nightmare Dungeon system, which I'll show you a bit later. So before you can really lean into Nightmare Dungeons, you are going to need a sigil to start off a Nightmare Dungeon. Now, you can actually sometimes get these through like random events around the world, but one of the easiest ways is to actually get it through the Whispers of the Dead, which is a system you'll see all over your map once you go into tier 3 difficulty. These different things right over here, which get you Grim Favors. This one, for example, rewards you 3 Grim Favors. Once you have 10 of these favors, which is marked in this red over here, you'll come to this tree and you'll pick a reward and open up the cache and most likely get a Nightmare Sigil. At first, you might open up your inventory and be confused as where the sigil is. It will be in the Consumables tab over here, and this is what they look like. Now you can see this one is a tier 10 and this one is a tier 13, but now your very first Nightmare Sigil will probably be tier 1 or so, and will have like level 50 to 53 level enemies in the dungeon, I believe. But you're most likely going to be pushing higher tiers, and the easiest way to do this is not by running tier 1 over and over and over again, because even as you do those Nightmare Dungeons, you will get more sigils forming, dropping from them, but they'll most likely be roughly 1 tier higher or the same tier of the one you're already doing. Though you should know that you can craft sigils, and this is most likely something you're going to be doing quite a lot to get very specific sigils, especially in terms of different tiers. You can craft up to any tier you want, and the way you do this is by going to any major town and looking for the occultist, which is right over here. It looks like this symbol with the 3 circles and the triangle between it. We're going to go there. So at the occultist, after a certain level, I think it was somewhere around 55 or somewhere around there. I can't remember how this unlocked, but this was locked for the first few Nightmare Dungeons that I did do. But once I was able to, I used the salvage sigils part over here, and I salvaged a sigil that I no longer wanted. Like this tier 10, I can salvage it, and you get sigil powder. And using the sigil powder, you can go into craft sigils, and you can select between ancestral, which is a lot higher than what I could probably do right now. Or you can do the sacred ones, which are the ones that are within range that I can do. For example, tier 11 to 15, and maybe pushing 16 to 20. For reference, tier 10 has about level 60 enemies, 20 has about level 70 enemies, and I'm sure it probably goes 30 for level 80 enemies, 40 for level 90, and so forth, I believe. And in order to craft, all you have to do is select it over here. You'll see it will take sigil powder from me over here, and I'll craft this, and it will give me a sigil that is somewhere within that region. You can see, I think it was this one over here. This is the new one, the tier 12, and it will come with affixes. Like, for example, monsters deal 75% more damage to barriers, which is terrible for my build. But I also get an affix myself. Killing a monster grants 1.5% attack speed and move speed, stacking up to 15% for my character, which can also be really cool. But there's also other affixes that change how the dungeon works. Like sometimes there'll be something that follows you that explodes every like 15 seconds that you need to stand in, or else you take a ton of damage. In order to start a Nightmare Dungeon, all you have to do is consume the sigil by using it. Just right-click, use it. It will ask you if you want to do it. You open up your map. It should take you to where it was. If not, you'll find it with the X marks the spot over the dungeon right there. So it's this one, and I'm just going to teleport to the nearest waypoint and go there. Once you get to the Nightmare Dungeon, it will look like this with all this like nightmarish stuff around it. So once you're in the dungeon, all you have to do is complete it as you would normally. You just do have a limited number of revives. This one says if I die more than 12 times, I will no longer be able to revive, and the Nightmare Dungeon will essentially disappear. There is no timer though, so you can take as long as you want, and you don't have to kill any unnecessary enemies within the dungeon if you don't want to. I'm going to go ahead and complete this and show you what happens at the end. So after you complete the boss at the end of the dungeon or you finish it, this little bubble will appear, you'll collect your rewards in the middle of the screen, and you'll get an awakened glyph stone. This is going to be to upgrade your glyph. So if I select this, you have to carefully pick which glyph you want to allocate experience to. For example, I want to upgrade this one over here. You'll see it will take it enough to the next level. It only needs 5 experience. I'm able to allocate 26 experience. So we upgrade, and then it will take it to the next level, and it will show us we can allocate 21 experience, and you can select which glyph you want to upgrade. I'm going to keep upgrading this one, and then you just repeat this process with multiple nightmare dungeons to upgrade your glyphs so that they're a lot stronger. You'll also note that I got really lucky this run by finding 2 sacred unique items that I already had, right? But one thing you should notice is that the actual ability or aspect on it, you can see the one I have equipped has an increased critical strike chance of 24%. This one that I just picked up only has 17%. This is based off your movement speed bonus though, however. Though I must say that the ring I got, the new ring, actually has a better percentage chance of refunding my resource cost compared to the one that I already have equipped. So it's things like these you will be on the lookout for finding the best in-slot pieces of gear. Now you might be seeing that I have all these little stars next to all of my gear, and I'm going to be talking about gear and how to upgrade it and changing the aspects and re-rolling some of the different item stat things there. Like for example, this one has poison resistance. I'm going to show you how you can change that to something else. Let's go ahead and do that. Now at this point in this game, I really hope you already know to make use of the blacksmith in the game to salvage your gear, because you're going to be using this to do upgrades. And also it's the same dude who does your upgrades for your weapons and armor. But first I'm going to salvage. I generally salvage everything unless I need money. I will always salvage legendary items unless I want to keep them. But I will never sell them because the sell value is not worth it compared to having to salvage it, because you rather need the salvage stuff. So salvage all will salvage everything except the legendary or unique quality items. Then you have to click this little pickaxe thing, and then I'm going to salvage this thing over here because I don't want the aspect on it. And I also, actually, wait a minute. I will actually be keeping this amulet over here for the aspect on it, and I'm going to show you how to take that aspect off and put it on a different slot of gear. This is actually an aspect that is not available through the dungeons in the game. In terms of these sacred boots, I don't need them. I'm going to destroy them, and this is going to give me a special currency over here called Coiling Ward. This is also something you get from salvaging legendary armor. However, I'm going to keep the ring, and I'm going to basically replace it with what I currently have. Even though it's the same thing, it's just slightly better. Now, the reason it's better is actually because it is a sacred unique ring instead of a normal unique ring, as you can tell at the top of the item. I just noticed here, very sneakily, this new ring has a much higher item power compared to the one I already have equipped. This also means instead of only being upgraded 4 times, it can be upgraded 5 times. Anything that is sacred is able to be upgraded 5 times. And you'll notice this in the stars. For example, my sacred legendary gloves, 5 stars over here. But for example, this normal legendary ring, only 4 stars. The normal amulet, 4 stars only. But anything that has the prefix sacred is able to be upgraded 5 times. Now, while at the blacksmith, you can use upgrade weapons and armor only for your weapons and armor. However, for amulets and the rings, you will need to go to the jeweler instead. So at the jeweler, all you have to do is use the upgrade jewelry. Select the piece of jewelry by just right-clicking it or adding it into this section over here. And now you can see the upgrade as well as the material cost. The first cost is always going to be materials that you get from common items that are basically like colorless. Upgrade it. The second time is going to add an additional resource which you get from salvaging blue item. The third one is going to be for salvaging rare items. Now, the point gets a little tricky here because now you start to get to the resources needed from salvaging legendary items. This is why you want to salvage legendary items. You can see here, this is from salvaging legendary jewelry specifically. I have 35. I only need 2. Upgrade. Nice work. The next one is a little bit tricky. This is Forgotten Souls. Now, these are not found by salvaging anything. These are actually found during Helltides, and I'm going to show you later on in a Helltide what you can look out for to get them. Normally, they're like a mining node, like how you would find ore. I usually get them through there, but you can get them through a variety of ways in the Helltide. They drop from like random things, especially sometimes elite enemies or bosses that you can defeat during a Helltide. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and do this upgrade as well. And now you'll see the item will have an extra 25 item power, as well as an increase to all of those different stats. They're much higher than what they were previously. You will, however, notice that the new one doesn't have a socket. Now you can do this again at the jeweler. Now you'll be using the jeweler to add sockets and remove sockets from all pieces of your gear. And you can use this little button over here, add sockets, and you will see that items that are applicable to have sockets added to it will be open like this one over here. The rest have the maximum amount of sockets they're allowed. The headpiece is allowed 1, the torso is allowed 2, the pants is allowed 2, boots do not have sockets, gloves do not have sockets. The weapon is able to have 2 for two-handed weapons. For one-handed weapons, it's only allowed 1 socket. And rings and jewelry are only allowed 1 socket too. So we're going to add this over here, and this is going to take a scattered prism, which is a resource that is generally dropped from bosses and world bosses within the world. Luckily, I have 12 of these. I don't recommend wasting these early on gear that you think you might be replacing very soon. So I'm going to go ahead and add a socket to that one, and you'll see now it has an open socket that I can use. In fact, I can actually go ahead and use the unsocket feature here at the jeweler to take the diamond out of the one that I was using previously, and then just take the diamond, because it has the 7% resistance to all elements, which I want on my build, I'm going to slot it in over there, and now it is a much better version than the one that I had previously, as you can tell already. It's not the greatest ring for my build, but it is something I will take because it's an upgrade. Alright, so now let's talk about aspects and re-rolling those different stats on gear. Remember I talked about this amulet that I got over here recently? It says here, well, unstable currents is not active, blah, 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 blah. I want this on my build. However, I only want that unstable currents. I don't want anything else of this item. To do this, we're going to head to the occultist again, which works all with aspects. Aspects, if you don't remember, are the things that you can get from your codex over here, which are gained from completing dungeons within the world. You can actually come here, find specific ones, show your class only, and then just mark them on the map so that you're able to find where they are, just like this. You can see this one here is for my class, but not all of them are for my class. Like this one over here is for rogues. But as I said, not all aspects in the game are found through the dungeons. Some of them can only be found as legendary items within the game, much like the amulet that I have right now. So we're going to head to the occultist over here. Now you'll see there's 5 options at the top. We're going to be using the first 2 for this case here. The first one is imprinting. We don't want to imprint just yet. We want to extract. Extract is what it does when it takes the power off of this amulet, but it deletes and destroys the amulet in the process. So I'm going to take this over here. I'm going to put it here. It's going to take the power off of it just like that. I spend the gold, I remove it just like that. Now you might be wondering, like, where does it go? Like, is it just something you click from here? It's not in the Codex of Power. In fact, you can find it in this little tab here on your inventory under aspects, and it is hidden over there. This is where you'll find your aspects that you've extracted. So now on the imprinting tab at the occultist, we're going to go ahead and add our amulet in the first slot, and then we're going to drag this new power over here from our inventory. And this is going to basically change our amulet. It's going to add this aspect to it, and you just have to use the currency that it spends here. It's really cheap, rare crafting material. Imprint the aspect, boom, nice and easy. Now you can see the aspect has the skill or aspect that we wanted to have. You should know, however, that you cannot extract a aspect that you've imprinted. Now that I've imprinted it on this amulet, I will not actually be able to take it off again. So if I want to move to a new amulet, I have to find that aspect again on another legendary piece of gear. So do be aware of that. All right, so let's talk about re-rolling some stats on gear. This is very possible and is done at the occultist as well. It is the very final option here called enchant item. To give you an example, I'm going to use this on my ring. However, you should know that this is not usable on unique items because you cannot change unique items at all. They're always set to be the same, different stats and ability or effects every single time. You can only change legendary gear. You should know that this does usually take really rare resources to do, so you should be very careful of this. For example, this one uses 1 Fiend Rose. This is not something you come by quite frequently. It is also very expensive. As you can tell, this is 500,000 gold. And it can only be done to 1 affix on a piece of gear. I've already done it for this one apparently, so I cannot change this ring. But essentially what you do is you pay up front, you pick a different stat that you want to change. For example, on these gloves over here, let's say I want to change the lucky hit chance. I can select it on the left-hand side here, and then I enchant it. It takes your resources, it takes your money, and then you can either pick to stay with what it was currently, or pick one of 3 to 2 other options that might be better. I recommend doing this for gear that sometimes says like adds 2 points, skill points to some skill that you don't even use on your build, but the rest of the item is good, and you want to just make use of the other stat that's not actually helping you. And also, I recommend only doing this for gear that you plan on keeping for a while, because otherwise it can get expensive. Okay, so let's talk about Helltides. Helltides can be seen sometimes during the game only in World Tier 3. It looks like this. It kind of marks two different little areas of the map like this in this like dark red. This doesn't mean that this is a PvP zone. It has nothing to do with PvP unless it overlaps one of the original PvP zones. You'll see that the Helltide is marked by this icon, and it usually lasts for an hour, and it allows you to slay enemies and collect something called aberrant cinders that are used to open up chests. Now, while you're in a Helltide zone, you will be able to see your currency over here next to the map. For most chests to open will cost 75, but for weapons, it will cost around 125. Generally, you're just going to kill enemies, and they will drop this currency, and you will slowly pick them up. Enemies will mostly drop one of these cinders at a time, so it can take time to pick up all of these different cinders. You will also find things like these hell veins throughout the game, which I got really lucky finding right now, and these will drop you your things like your forgotten souls that we used in the blacksmith for upgrading gear. These are very important. These are things you should look out for when you're in a Helltide because you're going to be using them a lot for upgrades. It generally costs 2 of those to upgrade the final piece of your gear, and if you think about how many pieces of gear you have, it can add up quite a bit. Some of the best ways to farm these are by actually doing events within the actual Helltides. Sometimes if you're lucky, you will get the Legion event, which is this thing over here, overlapping, which is fantastic. Legion events generally award you quite a good amount of stuff and are done with a bunch of players, which can be really cool. But if not available or it doesn't line up the right way, you can just farm enemies at events where it summons a ton of enemies at once, because your goal is to fight many enemies, and it can be a little bit tricky sometimes when other players are killing enemies in areas before you've even gotten there. So I'm going to go ahead and collect enough for 75, and I'm going to show you how opening up the chest works. Alright, so I have enough points now to open up one of the special chests. Now, usually you can find them on your minimap when you're walking near them, but another cool way is to open up your map, and if you zoom in close enough, because when you're zoomed out like this, you don't see them, but when you zoom in close enough, you'll be able to see the chests like this. You can see here, this one has jewelry, this one has weaponry, this one is jewelry as well. So we're going to head to one of these, and that's how you can find them. Now, usually when you find these chests, they will always guarantee a type of equipment. So if you're looking for a very specific slot, like you can see here, this one says Tortured Gift of Rings. I know for a fact if I spend my 75 cinders here, I'm going to get a ring. Usually in legendary quality, hopefully in sacred legendary quality. We open up one here, and unfortunately we got just a sacred rare, which is kind of shit, but what can you do? But you can go ahead and farm another 75 and open up a different chest within the Helltide region and hope for better luck. And that's pretty much how Helltides work. Apart from farming different enemies and stuff for experience, you can also get drops from them too. Now, after you've completed all these systems, your main goal is to reach level 70, or at least be able to unlock tier 4, Torment difficulty, the 4th and final and hardest difficulty of the game. And this can be done by doing the capstone dungeon at any time that you feel comfortable around level 60 to 70, maybe even sooner if your build is really overpowered. But if you look at Kyovashad over here and you just go slightly left and up and slowly zoom in, you will see the Fallen Temple capstone dungeon level 70 plus recommended, because all the enemies, including the boss, is level 70 and it does not scale. So you should be prepared to be able to fight them. I was able to make it to the final boss, but I just could not stop getting one shot by some of his abilities because he put stuff all over the ground. But eventually I will be able to take this on in another 2 levels. And doing so will unlock the 4th and final difficulty at Kyovashad to change your world tier to Torment, where you will start to unlock ancestral items instead of sacred items, or alongside sacred items, which I'm assuming are going to be better than sacred. So that's what you got to look forward to for further endgame. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching.